I created the first course in employment discrimination in workplaces for colleges of business. And I ended up writing the first textbook in employment law. And as part of the first class, I ended up doing seminars that brought out the idea of DEI long before it was called DEI. And it turned into what it is today, which is far from which think about it, it's far from the reality it actually is. Once people find out what it actually is, they're like astonished. But that's what information does. It moves you from one place to another because you now know. And before you didn't know, but you thought you knew. And I call it stepping on somebody's toes. When we step on somebody's toe, once we are aware of that, we get off very quickly and apologize and go about our business. And this is no different. If you don't know that you are being non-inclusive, making people feel like they don't belong because of things that you're not aware of, and I've seen it thousands of times, then there's no reason to want to hold on to that once you do find out. And the do find out is not a awful process at all. We are all acts in progress, thoughts in progress, works in progress. We are all trying to figure out this new landscape that really we're sort of lucky to be in a generation that this has happened. And we're talking about for the whole history of the country, as long as it's been in existence. So being able to be a part of how that ends up shaping up, I think is an important and wonderful thing that people should not at all worry about feeling bad about. I know you've heard a bunch of crap. I know you've heard a bunch of stuff that makes it seem negative, but I promise you it's not.
We have got a special one for you today. Kellie Snider, who is probably one of the best people to watch on TikTok or wherever you get your socials from, because she is just an awesome person who is coming into some awareness herself and bringing it to us as well. And it makes it so much better to talk to someone who is within the process of rediscovering things, because you get to get the excitement from them and you also get a lot of education. I just really want you all to hear Kellie for a minute, and then we're going to have someone introduce her, and we'll be right to the show.
So a lot of people on social media, both black and white, wonder why I, a white woman, talk about race in America. Well, for me, I guess it started when I was a kid, and it included a lot of messages that never quite lined up. As a kid, I was taught the right words. Everyone's equal, red and yellow, black and white. I watched the civil rights battles on TV, and I understood, at least abstractly, who the good guys were supposed to be. But I grew up in a mostly white town in Oklahoma, so the lesson stayed theoretical. I believed the story without having to test it. Then we moved to New Orleans. Down there, I saw paint peeling off of buildings and revealing old whites-only signs underneath. I noticed that black girls and white girls at my all-girls school rarely mixed, and when they did, it could get tense. Like riots tense. Meanwhile, my brother's best friend was black. He was at our house all the time. I knew him, I trusted him, I hung out with him. He was just a good guy. Then later on, my brother and his wife adopted a child of color. I loved him immediately. No confusion there. And yet, in our household, my father warned us girls not to date black boys. My mother started supporting politicians who were clearly racist. And I was overwhelmed with cognitive dissonance. It was a case of getting one message in words, but witnessing something else in the real world. I had real relationships with human beings, including some people at school, that contradicted all these stereotypes, and then I was handed rules that reinforced them anyway. For a long time, I held on to all this without really sorting out what was going on. I believed we were all equal, but I saw that we were not. It was always in a package of for your own good. But the system didn't need blatant hate to function. It just needed silence and contradiction. As I was entering young adulthood, anti-racism was about finally stopping and asking why these stories don't add up, why love had conditions, why the rules changed depending on who was around. It's about resolving a contradiction you have learned to live with. That's where it started for me. I'm not an expert, but I've had some experiences in my life that I try to make sense of. I hope you'll join me. Get curious.
You know who this is? This is Kellie Snider. Not Karen, Kellie. Make sure you follow her on all her platforms. Kellie Snider is one of many YT people who are currently exposing the history of slavery and racism. There are many white people all over this platform and others that are doing the same as her. She is doing deep research of her own to remind her of what her ancestors did to ours. So, indigenous, natives, or black people, whatever you're calling yourself these days, when you see YT people speaking up about our history, just let them. I've always said this, maybe not publicly, but I've always said, in order for us to overcome racism, the people who created it have to destroy it. I don't care how much marching we do, how many leaders die for us, it's not going anywhere until they kill it. You see, the revolution has already begun. You just thought we were going to be on the front line. They are. So when you see YT people online talking about things that Kellie Snider talks about, you don't have to say anything. Just repost it. So when you see them going head to head with each other, stay out of their business.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Quilted Hearts Chats and the podcast. And we are where we are stitching together stories through that deepened understanding. And we have a wonderful guest on today that will help us do that. First, I want to make sure that we get this out the way. Please like and subscribe and share these videos because we want to reach the audience that needs it, that doesn't know about it, and also the audience that knows but needs to hurry and get into the next episode. And introducing herself is my Aunt Dawney. Aunt Dawney.
Hi, everyone. Dawndi Bennett Alexander here, otherwise known as Dr. BA. And I am, for the past 43 years, the person who has done an awful lot in employment law and DEI, which came out of employment law and my teaching of it, my creating the first course in it for colleges of business. You can imagine that the impact that January 20th, 2025 had on that when DEI, at least in the federal government, and then of course it drifted to beyond, became basically illegal under the executive order signed by President Trump. So one of the things we realized in that happening was how people sort of let it go without a great big fuss about it, because primarily my experience had shown with thousands of people, they simply did not know what it was. So our mission in bringing you every conversation with Quilted Hearts Chats is to show you the ways in which DEI shows up that you may not have been aware of. Our purpose is not to advocate, although we have clearly, if I've been doing it for 43 years, we have our own ideas about it and positions on it. The trouble is that the way it was introduced to most people was basically as a political football that was made to be a wedge issue. And in doing that, there was a lot of misinformation. And because of that, our attempt with every single podcast we do is to inform. Not to advocate, but to inform. You get to make your own decision about whether you think it's a good idea or not, but at least you'll be doing it on the basis of information. And boy, did we find information source for you today. Oh my God, Kellie. Kellie have you ever had a situation where you wanted something You thought you knew what you wanted. It came, and it was actually you hadn't covered the waterfront. You really didn't know all the details of what you wanted. That's what Kellie is for me. Kellie came up with the idea of walking and giving insight into all sorts of things that form the background of what our attitudes are about race, about gender, about things that divide the country and have done more so now. As she walks along in her videos, taking walks, and it has been on so many levels, so incredibly effective, especially for somebody like me who has done this work for 43 years, and I come into it at a certain place. I come at it from a legal point of view as a lawyer and as somebody who taught law for 43 years. Kellie's like, I'm not trying to do all of that. I'm a behaviorist. That's my background. But I'm just a person who's just trying to make sense of what's going on. And I know because of my experience that there are pieces that are missing for people, and I'm trying to provide those pieces. Kellie, thank you for that work. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being invited to participate.
Yeah, it's really, I know. And the one thing that we should add at the top of this is that Kellie is also an artist. So she has her own original art, which is amazing. I'm kind of loving the carcass with the baby inside of it. That is oh my gosh, this is just woo. We're really going to keep this carcass going so we can keep that baby growing. I don't know what it would be afterwards. You know, I believe in a lot of Walking Dead stuff, so a little scary, but yikes, it's the truth, isn't it? So I really enjoy what you're, what I can see of you from the outside looking in. It makes me want to know you more, and that's why we love having you here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Kellie, how did you get started with this?
Yeah.
How did I get started? Well, there was a certain election that occurred. Trump was elected once. We went through that, and I thought, okay, we must have learned our lesson. We're not going to go down that road again. And then to have this country elect that man again, I was grieving. I was just really in a bad place about it. And I was thinking about, and I'm observing the things that he immediately starts tearing apart, like trans rights, the civil rights, women's rights, everything, everybody's rights are being destroyed and dismantled. And so I decided that just for my own edification, I was going to go back through our history and look to see where things went wrong, where we became the country that would elect Donald Trump 2 times, because that's not okay. And as I went back through our history, I kept running into racism. Racism was always a factor in every problem that we've had throughout our history. It might not have been the thing that was front and center, but it was always a component. The farther back I went in history, now Jim Crow, the Civil War, Revolutionary War, and then all the way back to Europeans first landing on the continent and colonizing. And it was like, damn, this is the foundation of our country. Our country was founded on racism. Not all the stuff that I was told in school about religious and all that stuff, it wasn't even founded on that. It was founded on racism. It was founded on using human beings to help us make money. And that infuriated me. So I started talking, I just started venting. And I started, I'd go out on my walks and I would just record something. And then I decided I would post some of them. And I didn't know what people were going to think, especially me as a white woman speaking about racism in the United States. I certainly have all the privilege, accorded to white people. And so I wasn't sure how it would be accepted, but I decided I'm just going to vent. I'm going to throw some stuff out there. And apparently a whole lot of people wanted to hear what I had to say. So I just like doing it. And that's what I'm doing today. I find it, well, first of all, I'm an avid learner, as I say in my videos, and I really like learning new things. This time I am really frustrated that these are things I should have already known. So I am digging through, it's not just your history, it's my history too. And I'm digging through it because I know that if I didn't know this, a lot of white people didn't know it either. And I figure if there's one thing I can do, it's tell these stories, because there are many things that I have talked about since January that I had no idea about. I'm not happy about that. I feel like it's part of the systemic racism in our country, that white people are not kept educated so that we won't see that something needs to be done. And I mean, there's many groups of how white people think, but there's the people that are overtly racist, and then there are people who don't think of themselves as racist, like me, but who inherit certain things simply because we don't know any better. And that sounds ridiculous to most Black people I say it to. It sounds utterly ridiculous because none of this stuff is secret. It's it's currently in history books. It's being dismantled as we speak, but it is stuff that we could have known. If we had known, we should have been looking for it. And a lot of us just didn't.
Kellie, your experience very much reflects the 43 years that I taught employment law. And in order to be able to give context at the beginning of the course, I would always, we're sitting in a classroom, it's got all sorts of people in it. And in order for people to sort of come out of that, because you're going to accept what I say one way, if that's what you're thinking, that this is what the world is, versus what the world was at the time the law was passed, right? So I need to put you back there so you understand why we have this law in the first place and why we're talking about this. Right. And every single time, and it's just like, my first few times, it was like, this is no big deal. I'm just putting you in context. I would do that with anything. And people were so startled. And I didn't even talk about slavery. This was after the Civil War, from then through Jim Crow to the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which is what we were going to be talking about, Title VII, which is about workplace discrimination. Well, by the time I finished just giving this little thumbnail of what the world was like so that you saw what Congress was dealing with when it passed the law, students were absolutely stunned. And at first I couldn't understand, what is the problem? This is just history. Nobody's hiding it. I don't have an agenda except to make sure that you have context so you can understand what the law is. And they would come up after class and say, and I taught upper level and then graduate students up to PhD level. And they'd say, why didn't I know this? I am so angry that I didn't know this. Like, what are they trying to hide from us? And I'm thinking, especially you mentioned now it's in books now, but they're taking it out. If you didn't know it before, and you think about it, you had in your head what you had. Can you imagine what it'll be like for the people after these books have not only has the stuff been taken out of these books, but the other books that are directly related to it? For instance, books in a small shop in a museum, the gift shop at a museum about a particular thing, they've made them take those books out that are about something like slavery, and you're looking at the slave museum, right? What people don't know has exactly the impact that you talked about. If you don't know, us doing something like what happened for pretty much every demonstration before George Floyd, where it wasn't because we were all looking at the same video, right? People would be like, white folks are like, what is the problem? From their all the sense in the world, because it's like we're all having the same experience, right? And I know from my students, thousands of students, that's what they thought was happening. And it's like, no, my experience is not like yours. Even as a lawyer, even as a professor, my experience is not like yours. You are in a whole different world. And it is amazing to me that you came along and you were willing to say those things. And when I painted for you the picture of the way it hit me, I think that's what happened. And I love that people get to see what I experienced all the time, which is you say these things. It's not like you have some axe to grind. You are just a person trying to figure out the world. This is what you came across and realized was different than what you may have been taught. And you're trying to say, this is why we have these thoughts in our head, which I call messages, that we need to deal with and try to make sense of, because this is not, as you have said, this is not their problem to deal with. This is our problem as white folks to deal with, because we put this system in place. It operated without us having to have any input. We learned precisely what they wanted us to know, which was to be clueless about this and just take this as the norm. So the work is on us to learn that stuff and make it better. And you take it just little chunks at a time. But those chunks you realize through what it is that you say are not just chunks of stuff that happened a long time ago. This is stuff that we're seeing the results of, residual of, the continuation of today. Even in something like Laura's hospitalization and eventual death, because she was not covered by a system that they tried to take out of, to have the least amount of coverage for Black folks that they thought were like cheating the system in some sort of way, right? When you do one, cutting off your nose to spite your face, you think you're advocating for one thing, and as it turns out, it hurts these other people, like voting against your own interest as a white person. And as it turns out, it impacts white folks too. That is so startling for so many people. And you do such a good job of showing the ways that it pops up all the time. And it would, because this is what the system is built on. No, the system is operating the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. I think that was a huge revelation for me, to realize I should have known this. I should have been taught this, or I should have at least somehow found out that it was there, and it was important for me to look for it, to dig into it. Mm-hmm. But I didn't. I was taught, because of privilege, that everything was okay. And because everything's okay for me, I don't need to worry about it. But then this administration comes in and they start doing these horrible things to immigrants. I mean, they've already been doing horrible things to Black people just for existing in America. They've got these people that are legally here from other countries, either legally or already citizens, already naturalized, and they're throwing them into places like Alligator Alcatraz, where they lose 1,200 of them. And, you know, I was raised to believe America was this brave, bold place that all the other countries looked at with envy and depended on us for all this crap. And then this just revealed that we're not even close to the top of the heap of people of countries that are doing what's right in this world, at least not in the last 10 years. So I just go out every day. And it has turned out that every day I have a huge list of stories to get to. But I just want to say, you know, sometimes it's something I know about, but I don't know about it in any great detail. Sometimes it's something that's completely new to me. And figure, you know, I'm learning it in bits and pieces. I'm reading books, I'm Googling and all the things that you do to learn. But I figure, well, you know, my followers, the majority of my followers are Black people who are relieved to see a white person finally saying something. I get very few white followers, and the truth is they're the ones that I'm trying to reach, because they're the ones that have the same experience of the same lack of experience in this part of our history. It's simply not taught to us. And that's wrong. It infuriates me. You know, I'm not a spring chicken anymore, and I should have known this when I was a kid.
I agree with you, Kelly. And one of the things that you said earlier, why it's so important for white people to understand this, really get it, because white people are just as much affected and subjugated as people of color because of the things that are happening to all of us. So there's a level of things that you have to do to keep up the story, to make sure that we stay in the place that we're in. There's a level of work that we have to do to keep up the story. For example, you know, if I use a past example, like my usual go-to one is how hard it must have been, and it's the truth, and you can tell it in history that we can actually get to make sure that no Black people, no slaves learned how to read or write. How did that help anyone? What it helped was to make sure that people could continue to stay subjugated. But you find out in history, when you do enough research, there were a lot of people that couldn't get by with their slaves if they didn't know how to read, to weigh things, how to measure. They had to know these things in order to do the job that they were supposed to do. So you had to teach them, but it was illegal. There was a law saying that you cannot teach your slaves to read and write. How does that help anybody? And if you have a law like that, that means that you needing something and you need me to help you, you would be breaking the law if you gave me the tools to do so. That's putting you in a position too that is terrible. So we bring it to today. And you want to take all of the immigrants out. You're searching places where you know a lot of people who are of a certain race and ethnicity have a lot of jobs that they do, whether it's one job, two jobs, five, whatever it takes to get their household together. And you go to these places and you take them away. What does that say for the people who are running businesses? Let's just talk about legal. The people who are running businesses have to now hire more people, try to keep their business in play. so that they can continue to make their own money to live. But you're affecting everyone. And the more we continue to think that we're not together in this, makes it worse. And we have to agree that we're in this together, and we have to work together to get to whatever end we're looking for as a country. But I don't believe that anybody, except for these 300 people maybe that are in charge right now, believe that we should be out of the loop of the world, that we are some superpower, that we are no longer are expressing ourselves as a superpower. We're acting as if we are burning things down and have no plan to build them up, or the expectation is that somebody else will come build it up. You know, I don't, because it's the conversation is what do you call it, duplicitous, where you're saying that we need to be a country by ourselves. We don't need anyone's help, but then we need the help to come build businesses into our country so that we can get our businesses back up. Which one is it? We're confused. And I don't know how anybody can keep this up, whether you think you're the master race or not. You can't keep this up. You need other people. So we just need to get that straight. But it looks like we can't even have that conversation because we're so busy blaming everybody. Everybody's it's everyone's fault but mine, right? I don't have to do any introspective look. I have to just make sure I point fingers out and everyone jumps on that, and our news cycle is even running in that direction. It's like, tabloid news now. And it just is very, it's disruptive for a household. And so for a whole country, it's just even more disruptive. We have to recognize too that we are in propaganda mode when we're not teaching certain things. We're only making sure you see the good side, which is what Donald Trump has been very clear about. That museum, the slavery museum, as you said, the Negro history, Black history museum has to go because there's too much truth in there that is an uncomfortable truth, but the truth it is.
And it's interesting, Renee, because that is truth. And this is what you keep trying to get to, Kelly. This is truth that is there. Right? Nobody's making this up. This is truth that is there that you simply weren't aware of, that because it was hidden, gave a certain picture. And that picture is what you want to preserve. And along with the picture comes these mindsets that make it so divisiveness is actually what you want, right? You did a whole thing on if blacks and whites were together during slavery and after, which they very often would have been if you had just left them alone, they would get to turn around and see, oh, we end up having a whole lot more in common against these people who are keeping us down. We ordinarily would. So that's not in their best interest. They don't want us to be together. So they end up, on the one hand, painting this picture that we're really awful as Black folk, that you're superior as white folks, that all the stuff that happens that's not right is their fault, Black folks' fault, brown folks' fault. You are doing all the right things that you should be, and that makes it easier for you to buy that story that says, I don't understand why these people are trying to say all this negative stuff about our country. The truth, right? A truth that everybody else everywhere knows. And it's like, why are you trying to hide this? People in other countries know we are not pristine. They already know that. So you look like an idiot trying to hide all of this when we all know that that's what was going on. And it shuts down the ability for us to be able to move forward based on truth. Black folks, and you talk about this, Kelly, Black folk know this stuff, right? White folks didn't know it. Black folks know it. And we love the country anyway and have fought and have been the first people to die in every single war. We were not only knew it, but we were living it and experiencing it every day and still believed in the country. It's not like your mind cannot hold two thoughts at one time.
Exactly.
You can look and still believe in the concepts that were put up there. Whatever those concepts ended up being, those words are still there. We are equal under the law, for instance. right? We're still holding you to that. But for some reason, the idea that you have to be, instead of accepting that and moving forward, the idea that you have to be this perfect thing that we all know U.S. wasn't, ends up prevailing. You keep on giving people, and we're seeing it now in real time with this administration, you keep giving people reasons to believe that version that's true is not really us. This is us. This propaganda that you talked about, Renee, that we put in place is instead, which only prolongs the problem. I mean, it's not like we have not seen this before. And one of the wonderful things I love about your pieces is that when you go do a deep dive to find out stuff, you found out stuff I didn't even know. Okay, like I didn't even know about that whole Mexican thing during the Depression where they repatriated them, and then when Hitler decided what he wanted to do with Final Solution, that's one of the things he looked at and admired us for, that we had taken all those people and put them back. I knew about the Japanese internment. I didn't even know about the Mexican repatriation.
Mm.
I didn't know about it. It was completely new to me.
Isn't that interesting that we did not know that?
And you know the things that's interesting too, Kelly, the things that you're finding out that you never knew cost us money. It costs us a lot of money in this country to be racist. So when we decided, okay, we're not going to have slavery anymore, you guys win the Civil War, whatever kind of thing. But the reason why they acquiesced, the reason why that war isn't still going on today physically, is because they got paid off. They paid them reparations, the farmers, the other businesses that use slave labor, so that they would stop. I mean, wow. Okay. That's who we are as a country. We did that and we've kept doing it. Japanese internment, the Jewish population that came and they settled here in the U.S. after leaving Germany, escaping from Germany. And then
many of them couldn't even come. They weren't allowed to come. That's why the Frank family died.
And we didn't want to get involved at first either. But then when we finally did, we felt we owed it to people. So we paid for that. We pay for a lot of things as long as it doesn't have anything to do with, the things that have happened that you should be paying people for, like Black Wall Street, which I know you talked about. What happened to the land that they took from that? What happened to Rosewood? What happened to the land they took from those people there? What happened to, we know that land got given back to the people in California, in Southern California, where they had the beach, where they owned beachfront property, and they took it from them. We could do those things if you don't have the power to insist that the laws that we have been working under are followed by all people. So that fight has always been our fight, just to be treated fairly, not any extra stuff. Except that when we're not being treated fairly, we do need some extra help to make sure that part of our existence isn't squelched or stamped out. The Civil Rights Act was all about that. And the Civil Rights Department that has been dismantled now was all about that. And so these things are happening again. And it's perfect that it comes from an abolitionist, which is what I find you to be, because that's what, this modern day abolition work. You may not be hiding people, but you certainly are giving them the power, the information.
I thought about it.
I tell you, if I had been still living in Southern California right there, because I used to live by Camarillo, where they did that big raid of the marijuana field, and I would have been very upset. Not only that, they took the people who were working there, running and watching and filming it. Thank you, Dr. Phil, for that. But they're, putting it on website. They're putting it on their own website and like using this as more propaganda and getting people all riled up, to people who they know they have already massaged into this whole backlash crew. I don't know what they call them. They're just, they show up in trucks and they're ready to fight. I don't understand what this is. Just the January 6th call, this calling that they have, and they hired these people to do these jobs that are just that we are finding disgusting work and giving them bonuses based on how many head count it's just, it's like slave. Because I think that's what it is. Donald Trump has always enjoyed some kind of putting fear in people and always threatening people with bodily harm. And he's actually killing people too. To me, he's a murderer because he killed those people on boats, and we have no data. We have no nothing. We don't know whatever you say. I think it's just all kind of like, let me see where I can play. This is my field, and we're all pawns.
We need to speak up now as much as possible because they're shutting people down, and we need to know who the other voices are and some way to connect because I worry, and my husband worries about me just doing what I do. This little old lady doing these walks and talking about things, and that we weren't taught, that it might not, it wouldn't play well with this administration. I'm not on their radar at this point, I don't think, but
have you seen the latest executive order? For the reason it was scary was because of exactly what you said. We're just these little people doing this stuff, right? I mean, we're not leading some national movement. We're not telling people to go out into the streets. It is elusive enough. It's loose enough that it can create for us legal issues, which is the most. I've seen a lot of scary things in the last 9 months. This is one of the scariest because we keep seeing, I'm a quilter. So, and that's why your pieces resonate with me so much because each one is one piece, but you put them together and look at what you have, right? Totally different kind of government than we expect the United States to have. And this piece is one of the worst ones I've seen. And I'm saying that as a lawyer. I'm saying it as somebody who's been dealing with this stuff for the past 43 years. It is harmful for the entire country because under it, we've seen what they have been willing to do with absolute laws that we have taken as that for as long as the law has been there, like the 14th Amendment. Well, yeah, we can still take away the right for you to be a citizen or ship you out somewhere, even if you are one. Straight up law. This is written so not only arbitrarily, but so loosely that we could get caught right up in it simply because we are saying things that don't agree with his position. What is that? That is
First of all, that's illegal.
Well, but see, we are a country of laws, right? We always have been, and that's the first thing we always go to. We say, but that's illegal. What we've learned in the last 8 months is it doesn't matter whether it's legal or not for these folks. We can't say that anymore because that doesn't matter.
It matters eventually because
think about what that means. Okay, so if we're not a country of laws anymore, if they can do whatever they want to, regardless of what the law says, where does that leave me? That's a hard one to think about because, especially as Black folk, we've always had that is the only thing we could depend on. We ain't got skin color we can depend on. We don't have gender we can depend on. We don't have wealth we can depend on. All we had was a law. You take that away, which they have absolutely been willing to do. Last week, they indicted Comey. What? I remember reading his book and thinking, what an honorable man. And I see why he felt like he had to leave that administration, because if you're a decent lawyer doing the law in a country of laws, this would never stand for you. So you just say, let me take myself out of the picture. Where does that leave him? Enemy number one, indicted. And what does the vice president say? More indictments are on the way. And the week before, Trump had said to the Justice Department, I want these folks, I want this taken care of now. And the next thing you know, Comey was indicted. That's not a country of laws. Okay, that's a country of retribution. That's authoritarianism. where people like me and you can have conversations about this that other people have access to if they click on them, and all of a sudden we're criminals? Seriously? That is something that I don't want our country to think is okay, which is why
but they have a mandate. They have a mandate. So we got to go ahead and do all of the things in Project 2025. There's a mandate. I mean, that's what the line.
I in last week, Kamala's book came out, and I had pre-ordered it, so it came, and I started reading it, and I hadn't really thought about that mandate stuff until I saw the numbers again, and the numbers where she said, a third of the people sat it out altogether, and a third voted for me. So I'm not sure what this mandate is that he thinks he has, but in his head, it is a mandate, which is why people like you become so important. And the truth is, and I'll just straight up say it, Kelly, and this has always been true throughout history. You're a worse threat than we are because you're white. You're the last person they want telling this. That's why abolitionists were so ill thought of by the powers that be. They were the biggest threat because, who's going to listen to us? But they'll listen to. And as much as we hate to say it, your husband's right. As scary a thought as that is for a country like ours, right, where you think you'd be protected in your freedom of speech, your freedom of person, you haven't hurt anybody, you haven't broken any laws, and the thought that we even have to think the thought that we could get in trouble for this is crazy. But that just goes to show you how far we've gotten, which is part of what you say. That's why you started, because it's like, this isn't right. Something is not right here, and let me process this. And I know I'm not the only one having that same thought. And look what happened. Were you somebody that had a great big following before this?
Oh, no. I couldn't, I was, as an artist, I couldn't get, I had, I think I had 800 followers on which one? No. On Instagram, I had 364 followers for a couple of years. I could not, followers, people who had followed me. I couldn't break that. And then it was like 800 on TikTok. Now I have 74,000 on TikTok and 100 and I think I'm up to 115,000 on Instagram. This has really resonated. People understand that it needs to be said, and a lot of people of color have told me that they really appreciate that I'm saying it as a white woman. So I had no idea that would play that way. I thought I would make a few posts and get some stuff out of my system, but I have been shown so much love and support for this work. I mean, I get the trolls, I get the MAGA trolls, I get Black people who really don't think I should be talking about these issues, but those are few and far between. The vast majority of people are so supportive, and it's because of them that I have the strength, the energy, the desire even to keep making this public. I'm going to be reading about it anyway, right? So I might as well talk about it too. And it blows me away that I have been received the way that I have.
It doesn't blow us away at all. We absolutely get it. We absolutely get it. And you see how you see so few voices like that. The first person we had on our podcast was Tim Wise, who he calls himself a race worker, right? He has a huge following, national, international figure. And the reason we wanted him on as the first voice was because we understood that it was one thing for us to say what we were saying, it was another thing for somebody to be able to say it, because the truth is the positions that we tend to have tend to come from our own experience. So, when people hear us, it's like, well, of course, but that's you, Tim. You're not white. I mean, you're not black. You're not having that black experience that tells you this is the way the world is. And as it turns out, it resonates with people. And it resonates with them differently. Black folks are just glad to hear somebody white say it. White folks are like, I can believe you because you look like me. And the way you pull it off, you're not a firebrand. You're just, like you said, I'm just walking down the street, and this is what I came across, and here it is for you to imbibe it too. And yes, I have some definite thoughts about it, but I feel like you probably grew up pretty much like I did. You didn't know this stuff, and let me tell you. And to me, what I could hear from you was the same thing that came from my students. This explains so much. This explains so much. Now I understand why people would be so angry and why they would resent me, even though I haven't done anything to them, because the whole system was built for them and is moving along without them even recognizing that that's what's going on. And they are able to oppress me without them thinking that they have a part in this. And when in fact, they have a huge part in this. And one of the things I think probably they should be most resentful of is that they're being used to do this without their permission. It would be one thing to choose to do it. It's another thing to have somebody using you without you realizing they're using you. And now you've got to go back and do the work of not only figuring out what you don't know, but how you've got a part in it and what you're supposed to do with that.
Yeah, so
that's
true.
why I think race is such an important piece, because for people like you, it's just like with everybody else. We are products of our environment. We are products of our experiences. If you don't know this, I'm not going to treat you the same way I would as somebody who does know it and says, yeah, what's the problem? Okay, what's the problem with oppressive people? They're black. I mean, that's what the way this is supposed to go, right? You're in a whole different, and that's why I'm so committed to this, because my experience has been that white folks are basically people of goodwill who simply don't know, which is real different from the ones who do know and want it to stay that way. Education ends up being the piece then that becomes the key. You doing what you do to help them know. And then the thought is they would govern themselves accordingly. If you didn't mean to do it and you found out this is what you're doing, then you won't continue to do it once you realize that. Mm-hmm. That's why you do what you do, because you want people to be in that same position. You were talking about the trolls and the black folks that even say, you shouldn't be doing this work. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I just don't agree. Better. This is your experience. This is your story. Why wouldn't you be able to share that? And what you're sharing is information, and then your thoughts about that information in terms of how it impacts you in your life. Who is somebody to say you can't do that? That just doesn't even make any sense. Plus, this is such a huge issue that has been going on for the entire history of the country that we need all hands on deck. And it's just like you said, when you know better, you do better. And if I grew up surrounded by y'all and I know you don't know, and I know that's why you're doing the things you do, why wouldn't I tell you if I had learned something different? There's a space for everybody in this. And it's just like you said in one of your videos, this impacts everybody. This is not just a black folks problem. This, in order for you to keep your foot on my neck, you've got to stand there, which is a whole experience for you to have to stand there and not do all the other things you could do because you got your foot on my neck, right? So this is not Black history. This is American history. Everybody has a part in it, whether you wanted to be a part of it or not.
Yeah.
And turning it off, what anybody has to say about it just doesn't make sense, especially when you're talking about truth. And that things either happened or they did not happen. And that's a huge piece of what you do. You know, it happened or it didn't happen. This is what happened. And I love it that you're even willing to apologize when you get it wrong. And to correct your facts. And that's why, you know, people telling you
Update.
what they do in your comments is so important. Because, and I know this as an author, as a textbook author, as a novel writer, you are dealing with facts, but those facts they're usually things that you may not know, and you're taking other people's sources for it when you do your research, right? And if that research is incorrect, which is probably what happened with you, for instance, with the first case involving those who had been enslaved in this country, right?
Oh, right.
It was one thing, and then somebody told you it was something else. You went back and you fixed it. Like, okay, what is the problem?
Hey, I mean, that is another issue, Andoni. That is another issue we're dealing with as a country, as a people in this country. We have to learn how to take accountability for our crap.
That's why it stands out when you do it.
Yes, right. And individually and as a country, we really have to start doing this, because it's not, as they called it with Obama, this is the first time I ever heard this, is one of those Obama, the apology tour. It's not an apology tour. It's a setting the record straight tour.
Why would that be a bad thing?
Why? What would ever be gaining someone's trust? Oh, gosh, we shouldn't do that. We should make sure we pretend we're trustworthy and then stick it to them later. I don't want that. You don't raise children with that in mind. You don't tell children, this is what you do and this is how you're going to be. And then when you get them all into you, then you stick it to them. We don't do that. But that's what we're doing. But that's who we are as a country. When you have a president that won't even apologize, or just how about you just don't say it? How about you just don't say anything? There's a time where you can just be quiet. But the vitriol and the negative, the dripping and disdain, it comes across. I feel it. I don't agree with you, but I feel it. If I did agree with you, wouldn't I still feel it? You know, and I just don't think that we are going to be able to get past any of this until we start saying, what can we do? You know, they want you to do it when you have a marriage and your marriage is maybe, in trouble. So you want to go to counseling. Your counselor's never going to say, well, what did he do? What did he do? The counselor's going to say, what did you do? What could you have been doing differently? And where could you have made some changes? And how do you think you can fix this moving forward? That's what you would be getting. So why can't we just be that country? It would be simpler.
Well, I feel like it's really hard for white people to get into these conversations because they feel so much blame. And like a lot of people will respond with things like, but I never owned a slave, those kinds of comments. And the thing is, I feel like I want to teach them that you can say, I am so sorry that happened, and we need to do something to make sure it never happens again, without saying, oh, I personally did that. And I think that people need to loosen up a little bit. Everybody knows that we didn't do it personally. Well, I mean, there are things right now being done that are certainly, somebody's doing in real time right now. But I mean, as far as history goes, everybody knows that I didn't own a slave, that I don't own a slave, that I didn't, do any of I didn't lynch anybody. But basically, who cares? The point is, white people did that. We can say, you know what? I know white people did that, and it sucks. And I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And I want to do what I can to fix things to make things better as much as they can be fixed.
Mhm.
Which comes off very differently than, well, I never owned slaves. Okay, what's that got to do with the price of tea in China? I think it's irrelevant, especially since a lot of the stuff that came up then or was instituted then continues today without you realizing it is. One of the ways I get people to think about that is I ask a simple question: do you know what a threshold is? Okay, and people talk about, you take your wife over it, when you get married, your bride and stuff. Okay, but think about the word threshold. Threshold, we say and don't think about it. We know what it is for us today, but it came from a time when people had dirt floors and they used thresh to keep down on the dust, the leaving from, the wheat fields, so that it wouldn't be in the house and it would go out because, it's slippery. So they would put a holder there. It's called a thresh holder. Now, you never have to think about that in your life. But the truth is, we're still stuck with that word. And even though what it does is change, we don't think about it, but we still have vestiges of it. We still have those thresholds, even though we don't have thresh coming out of our houses anymore. Or Christmas. You probably celebrate Christmas without thinking at all that it was at some point some druid thing in one culture, it was some sun worship thing in another culture. You just sort of do what you're used to doing. This was no different. And we're still left with the vestiges of something long past the time when the original thing that started it has gone. That's the way it works. That's just the way it works. In a system that was created, given what you've explored about how things started in this country, why would we think our laws would be any different? Just like you talked about when they had the laws that left out, it was the Fair Labor Standards Act, and it left out domestics and it left out farm workers. Well, that was because the Southern legislators said you were not paying them the same wages. So, because that's 60% of who was doing that work. So they simply removed those from the law. And it wasn't until like the 70s that they put them into the law in the first place.
Wow.
That's a long time to have kept a whole group of people out based on purely on who the people were in the legislature at the time and how they thought about a certain group of people. And it's in the legislative history. When you read it, it's right there. I mean, they don't even play with it. It's like the niggas are not going to make the same thing that the white folks do here. That may work where y'all work, but it's not going to work here with us. So you're going to have to do something else if you want to law passed. Why would we want to protect that? It is what it is. The thing is, you see that you want it to do better, then go ahead and make it do better. But you can't do it by ignoring it in the first place, which is why your work becomes so important.
And then we don't want, right. And another thing that, and I just so I can tag right in, I'm sorry, Kelly, if you mentioned you have a son. How many kids do you have?
I have two sons in their 30s. One of them just moved back in here. He's working on his dissertation for his PhD in communications. And the other one still lives in Texas, where we moved up from. My husband and I moved up here about 8 years ago, and and my son still lives there, which is way, way, way too far away. So,
that reminds me, where do you want what you're doing to go?
I'm not entirely sure about that. I kind of have a book in the back of my mind. I have a lot more research before I can put that together. I just finished turning in my edit for a second edition on a book I wrote about. I worked in animal welfare for a long time, and I wrote a book about aggressive dogs. And so that book is coming out with a second edition, completely unrelated to this. This was something that I didn't plan on. It just happened. And it turned out to be something that I'm very passionate about. So I am gathering notes and trying to put together a a book that will address these kind of issues that we were just talking about, but why white people need to know this history.
What a great title.
Yeah, well, yeah, it would be. I have a lot more to do to get my thoughts together before I can create an outline, but that's what I think I'm going to do next. And just keep plugging along like I am.
You certainly need it. I know that there's a group of ladies that get together and have lunch. I don't know if you've ever heard of this group that they get mostly white women. Maybe I've seen a couple times where men have been involved, but mostly it's women who want to commune the way we're talking about like now. And they have lunch and they talk about all issues around race. And these are all white women, so they're feeling free to say even the worst questions that they think might be in their head out loud, so that they can be addressed. And I think this is what we have to keep doing. We just have to stop saying, "I don't know what to say. I don't want to stay away from that," or "I don't want to." You have to immerse yourself in other people and the way that they are, so that you can understand better. And I say that as a kid who used to live overseas a lot and be in, the American, which meant I don't speak your language and I need your help all day, every time, because I'm American. I don't understand what's going on. So,
I don't look like you.
And what'd you say?
And I don't look like you.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, definitely. Sure. Of course. And I was tall and I stood out from everyone anyway, in any group I was in. And then it just, you are enveloped into this a culture. They just hug you and they teach you and they give you all the information that you need to be able to function with them and not look like an idiot, because you're just given. Be vulnerable to it, right? I guess that's the word we're using these days. Just open yourself to it, and you will be surprised how much you get out of it.
That's a huge piece of what I get out of the way you deliver what you deliver, Kelly, because my experience for the past 40 years of not only teaching it, but also consulting about it, is that people respond to that in a very different way. They put their guard down because they see there's no reason to have their guard up in the first place, which opens them up to be able to take in the information and to learn it. And think about how quickly I have to do that in a classroom of 120 students, where they fit most predominant. Probably if I taught 5 at a time, Black folk at a time in that class, it was a whole lot. It was usually much fewer. And they have to be able to very quickly not only trust me, but not feel judged for where they were, what was in their head, for us to be able to discuss it and take them to a new place of accepting information that they may not have been exposed to before. That's a huge piece of why you resonate so much with me, because the way you're doing it accomplishes that. So I don't doubt that your book will be well received, because you can put the information out there, but if you don't do it in a way that makes it so people feel like they can open up to receive it, then they're not going to do that. A huge piece of what makes you so impactful is that that's the way you do it. And I love you for it.
I know. And you always open up with, I didn't know this. I didn't know this. And because you keep saying to us that this is something you just learned, I think gives people permission to say, I just learned it too. Just as long as you got it. And so when I asked about your kids, I was wondering how they take what you're doing, what their thoughts are.
They are so supportive. They are amazing. They're really proud of me. And you know how to, I don't know what your children's situation is, but, there can be times when they're a little embarrassed about their mom. Yeah, they have said some things that I'm going to carry with me the rest of my life. And one of them told me that he's just so proud that I'm his mom. And just that right there is so, oh my God. I've said both of them.
You're making me cry. Oh my gosh. How wonderful.
Some of them, I mean, they're the one that's living here now is one day I told him about a particularly hard story I was doing because, in fact, I don't think it's aired today. I think actually I'm going to air it. I'm going to put it up today. But I was out doing my walk and recording. And as I got back to my car, I realized that people were starting to gather at a pavilion near where I had parked. It was in a big park. Lots of families there that day, and they were putting up amplifiers. And the first few people that were there were just wearing casual clothes, but then the next few people that came were dressed up, and it was mostly Black people. So one gentleman was getting out of his car, and I said, I'm just curious, what's the occasion? Because it didn't look like a picnic so much. And he says, oh, we're just having a repast. And I said, because I'm a white woman and I don't know any better, I said, have a great time. I hope it's a great afternoon for you. Well, he looked at me a little, and I get back in the car and I'm like, I don't know what a repass is. I look at it, oh my God. And I caught him and I said,
oh my God.
I need to apologize to you. I didn't know what a repass was, and I am so, so sorry. And he said, you know what? It's okay. It's a celebration of life. We'll just be here supporting each other. And I was like, I just feel so badly for, responding that way. And he says, you didn't know. And I was like, oh my God, thank you for.
So for all the viewers, a repast, and I didn't realize it was even a cultural or racial thing. A repast is the food that you have, the gathering that you have after a funeral. Okay.
Yeah, that we don't. Well, we have a gathering after funerals, but it's not called a repast. And it's, we just usually a church will put together a meal and everybody will just hang out. But so I didn't know the word, and I said, "Oh, you just go have a blast." I was so mortified when I thank God I went ahead and looked it up in my phone at that moment so I could still catch him. And
that you wanted to catch him at all is amazing to me.
I feel like he was particularly grieving because, and I should have seen something about that up front, but he was lingering around his car. He was being real slow about joining the other people. And I had been sitting in my car just like looking at the video I just took and seeing if I needed to re-record anything. And so he had started to walk down to the pavilion when I had my revelation. So I was able to catch him and apologize. But oh my God. See, it's like just things in the past. There's just so much. And that was something that day, I just had this feeling that there is a whole different culture in our country that we have no idea about. And what I was going to really say was that my son he listened to me tell that what happened, and he got up and he just gave me a big hug. And I needed, because I was still mortified.
But you modeled behavior for him too. That is,
yes,
you won't forget. You modeled,
and for all of our guests too, to know that it is okay to go to someone and say, you know what, I had no idea, because it doesn't put a person that you're telling that to on the defensive. It just makes them want to do more, to say, oh, I get it. So let me how much do you want to know? I'll be happy to talk to you. But it opens conversation. And
That's
your
exactly what I found is people are so happy and willing to talk to me about things I don't know about. A lot of the topics that I speak about come from commenters who said, yeah, did you know about this, which is related to that?
oh,
And it wasn't until that day, which was just maybe 3 days ago, that happened. And I realized it's not just distant history. It's going on right now. We're just so separate.
Yep.
And that I don't know how your churches handle celebrations after a death. And I do know in my personal life that some of the most meaningful gatherings I've participated in have been after a funeral. Like, someone we all loved, our feelings are all raw. And so we have this experience. I totally get the value and the importance of having a celebration of that sort. But man, it would have been nice if I had known what to say the first.
that's also a really old word too, Kelly. Just so you know, a lot of people don't really use that a lot. I mean, at least in my experience, that age group is Well, I went to a funeral Saturday.
And what do they call it now?
There's some food in the kitchen after the first services. That's all they said.
I've only ever heard repast.
I know, but that's what I've heard too. But lately, I've been noticing that you can tell generations are moving forward where certain verbiage is just kind of moves with them, and then we replace it with something that's more modern. So I think they said celebration of life, a celebration after the something like what you said, Kelly. But if I had the thing in here, I would tell you what it says, but it didn't say repast. That we just haven't been seeing that term a lot, but I do know what it means. And I'm glad you do now too. It's good to know. For good for.
Yeah, I'll never forget what it means either. So.
I know. You might be educating some other people now and saying, and are you having a repast? What? So now you'll.
Oh, now you're bilingual.
Yeah, right.
I'm writing it into the schedule of events that I'm going to have a repast.
Oh, I love it.
Well, it's interesting. What's interesting too is Donnie has a story about churches, and I'd love it if you would tell Kelly real quickly your story about how you took with your class.
With my student
classes.
Yeah. Kelly, one of the things that's really important for me is, I was teaching in law in a college of business, right? So these are people who are going to go out into business, own businesses, be employees, be managers, stuff like that. And it's the flagship university of the state of Georgia. So, these are people who are going to be top of the line at what they do. And I don't think of these things as theoretical because I understand the impact that they have on what you do. Right. So one of the things that I required my students to do was 2 out of comfort zone experiences. And as long as they were safe, I didn't really care what it was. It was the idea of being out of your comfort zone that I wanted them to connect with. Right. So whether it was eating by yourself or going to a new thing you hadn't done, whatever it was, I just wanted you to be able to experience that. Because once you know that, you will govern yourself differently because you remember what it was like to be in that situation. And now you know how to reach out and make somebody else feel comfortable. And for the vast majority of people, they would be in the position of having those who are not traditionally in a workplace show up, be one of the only ones there. And I wanted them to experience for themselves what that would feel like. So if they were the manager, they would know what to do. So the students would always feel really uncomfortable, but a lot of them would choose church. And I first thought that was kind of strange. Like, okay, this is the South. Church is what we do, right? As it turns out, they were white students wanting to experience what it was like to go to a Black church, because the only time they'd ever seen it was on TV or movies, and they wanted to know if it was really the same. Well, they would get there, and they always had to do a one-page paper on the experience. They get there and stay stuck in the parking lot for a while because they realized they were sweating. They were so nervous about going in. And then they finally dragged themselves in there because they knew they had to do this paper. And people accepted them. And they reached out to them. They were glad to see them. They hugged them, all this stuff. It was like, for me, it was like, yeah, like, that's what we do. That's a surprise to you. And as it turns out, it was a surprise to them, because what it made them all think about was what they had in their head in that parking lot was, what if this was a Black person coming to my church? So without me having to say a word, they realized that their experience was totally different, and them accepting Black folks was totally different than Black folks accepting them. They were much more open to them, glad to see them, welcomed them in, and they were like, that's just not what would have happened at my church.
I went to a Black church as a teenager. It was my first time going there, and it was basically, we were going to another church in our community to invite them to some event we were having. I don't even remember what it was, but my brother and his best friend, who was Black, and I went to this Black church. And we walk in, and of course, I have long blonde hair. My brother's hair is dark and curly, so he fit in a little bit more. But I had this long blonde hair, and all the little kids are like, couldn't believe what they were seeing, and and they were absolutely charming. Everybody was just so welcoming, so warm, and it was a really good experience. And the music was way what we did.
We talked about the music too.
Yeah, music. And, music is very important to me. So that was like, whoa, they could do that in church.
That was really different, especially given that you had grown up in the church that you had.
Mm-hmm.
It would be quite conservative.
How long was it, Kellie? You can go ahead and tell us.
Your video.
How long did I?
Was the service? You can tell us. 8 hours? What was it?
That was the other thing they always commented on.
I don't know how long. I don't remember how long the service we went to was. Our services were normally, they can run long. It was, it's in the South. It was in Louisiana at the time, and some ministers got really long-winded, but I don't remember how long the Black service was.
Well, if you didn't remember it, that means that it must have been okay, because we are known for long services too. That's what we're known for. Would always say, I didn't know church would be so long. She was like, it takes a long time to get all of that stuff out.
Gosh.
But it's interesting, as a sociological thing, you realize that being separated didn't just mean you were in different places. It's like the Galapagos Islands. You create completely different cultures reflective of the people in that area, down to something as simple as the word you use for doing something like going to this event after the person died.
Yeah.
Or how you celebrate church.
It was kind of, I don't know. I am really glad that I learned that, because it's going to open me up to looking for things that might be done differently, just because it's interesting to know. But that made me realize that what you just said. I mean, we really have separated our cultures so much that we do certain things completely differently, and yeah, shame on us. I mean, well, maybe not shame on us, but it's like how much we would benefit from sharing each other's cultures. So
And that's how we're here. I mean, one thing I always say, Black people in this country don't know, we don't have another country. There's no place to send us back to.
yeah,
So everything that we talk about here in this country is because, and as Antonia said earlier, we still find the good in this country because it is our country. This is, you brought us here and now we're here. There's no direct lineage to any of that anymore. This is we're a created race, really, if you think about it, because look at us. We all look different. We all have had
with race isn't a real construct anyway. It was a legal construct. So we've invented all these differences just for cultural legal purposes so many millennia ago, and yeah, it's not even something real. So
arguing about that.
Certainly racism is very real, and we've made it into something that is very real, but it never had to be that. It's not biologically legitimate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I thought about when you were talking in one of your pieces about the law that passed in Virginia to finally separate and create really race there, and made it so that for Blacks, race was a lifetime condition. And I thought, because they based it on the mother. And of course, the reason they based it on the mother was because there was so much raping going on by whites who would end up having these mixed children. And if the children were mixed and half white and half Black, what were you going to do with that white half? Okay, and you couldn't own that because that would mean you admitted that you had sex with them in the first place, as if they're going around looking like you was not enough. Right? So and this shows you the power these people had. They simply made it into law. If you're born to somebody Black, then you will always be Black. Absolutely didn't have to say the words, right? But then, forever you will always be Black. There's no way to get out of this unless we let you out. And this covers up our sexual activity.
Yeah. And that was a whole other rabbit hole that I had no idea about. I mean, I mean, you assumed that some of that happened, but that it was so woven into the whole slave culture. I had no idea.
The breeding of women. Yeah, I know. You can't.
What it was like for the wives of the people who owned these Black men, to just see them walking around knowing that there was nobody that did this but their husband. Or maybe the overseer, right? I mean, you're stuck out in the middle of nowhere. This is science, right? You're not going to have these mixed kids come from this Black woman and her Black mate 9 times out of 10. So and not be able to say anything, to just sort of act like it wasn't happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
You brought your brothers and sisters in the big house.
That's a whole deep hole.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. But I'm glad that we're at least knowing that there's a hole. So mark that one and we go to the next place. And that's what we have to continue to do. And I don't want you to ever stop making your videos. And I really would love to see your book. I don't know if I've shared the story with you that Antonia and I started this whole process by through books. The Quilt Journeys Mystery Series.
On air, but it's the Quilt Journeys Mystery Series. And they're actually cozy mysteries that they have a quilt at the center that does mysterious things. And in order for you to figure out what it's doing, you've got to take the journey with it, and you end up being exposed to some aspect of diversity in some way, shape, or form. So they're actually about DEI, but with a quilt that does mysterious things at the center of them. And we now have them on Amazon.
That. Love it. I will let them. Are they available at the usual places?
Yeah, Amazon. Yeah, I don't know where else. I don't even keep track, but yeah, just Google
Okay.
something.
I will do that.
Yeah. And it just goes to show a couple of things. And I love this because it's a way to get back to you and your art, which is just so incredibly beautiful and interesting. And I love it that it's so message filled for you. But it just goes to show that these things come out in a lot of different ways. You started this with that wonderful painting of the woman in church that you wanted to deal with, and you were still sort of finagling, I think I'll move this over here or take this out because this is too dominant. But it was for you wanting to put down on a canvas your feelings about what was happening with you learning something different than what you'd always grown up with in church. Mm-hmm. And I love it that you use your art as a vehicle for being able to express that part of you. You know, people think that it must be one thing or another. No, it doesn't. It's whatever it resonates with for you. For some people, it's music. For some, it's art. For some, I mean, it's just all sorts of different stuff. I remember going to see a woman's art who she did dots, like polka dots, like dots all over her art. And it was like, okay, what's the dot thing? Well, as it turns out, she was a Black woman, and she was taking a road trip once with her family, and they stopped to get something to eat. And as her mother was drinking her drink, it was like actual china and glassware. She saw this dot on the bottom of it. So she told her mother about it, and she said, what is that for? And mother said, I don't know. You know, that's when you go back up there. And it was during Jim Crow. And of course, they had to go to the back. So when she went to the back to take the dishes back, she asked the woman, what is this dot on the bottom for? And the white woman behind the counter said, it's so that we know the stuff that you niggas drank and ate out of, so that we won't have to give it to the white folks. That's like a direct quote, right? From then on, all her art had dots in it. So, you know, it manifests in different ways for different people. Mm-hmm. And yours, I love it that you use that as well as your videos to be able to express that journey that you're taking with these issues. And it is a journey.
Mm-hmm. It is quite a journey, for sure.
Yeah. For sure. And, you know, I think we shouldn't leave without talking about that. The juxtaposition of how we go through life. You go to school, the vast majority of people go to public school. You're given a curriculum. That curriculum ends up, as we especially are seeing now, being created out of somebody's idea of what's appropriate and not appropriate. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, most people don't go, you know, once you get past your history classes, what kid is going to go look at some more history? It's just not going to happen. And right. So really, you're stuck back with what it is that you knew at that time that you finished those classes. If it doesn't go in then, it usually doesn't go in. And if you're growing up in a homogeneous system, which, as we know from the book, even if nothing else, was created to be that way, the book Color of Law that you do a piece on, which I have used in my sessions with people. It was created by the government to have those districts, those places that people were separated from each other in, Jim Crow as it applies to housing. If that's so, your church is there, your school is there, your housing's there, your friends are there, your neighbors are there. That becomes your life experience. I'm not sure we're supposed to get all this other stuff from. Of course, there are many, many more resources now than there used to be. But the truth is, you're going to be a product of it. So in learning and doing the work that you're doing and people accepting that work, it's so important to have what we call space and grace, the space to be able to learn that there are differences, and the grace as you take that journey, grace in us learning that it is a journey that you are taking, that there are things that you don't know that we know, just like the, the after funeral thing. And then there are things that you know that we don't know. There are a whole lot less of those because we have TV and movies and stuff that, expose us to all of that much more than you do being exposed to us. But it's so important for people to understand the ability that we have to make that journey that you're taking, and hopefully that many, many more people will take, as something that you find support in us with, and that you all over with, because it's not as if you had a choice about this. Okay, you were exposed to what you were exposed to because that's how you grew up. It's not something that you need to be blamed for, especially when you have chosen to do the work of learning better so you could do better. And to have, as you talked about, for those other MAGA folk who are laboring in lack of knowing, it's a choice, but not doing things like, making fun of them and stuff like that. It's just not a very compassionate or productive thing to do.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot we've covered, but I don't know if we've gotten it all. Kellie, is there another part of this, your journey that you're taking, that you want us to be aware of, that you want listeners to be aware of? Come see you.
I think, I guess the important thing that I feel we need to work for, and I understand. One time on my videos, I asked, what could we do to come together to fight against this fascist business that we're dealing with now? And quite a few people were like, you're all going to have to do something, and we'll see if we want to do it because we don't trust you, essentially. And I think back to, all the things that I've been studying. I think back, like Bacon's Rebellion, where black farmers, black slaves and poor white farmers were coming together to fight for their mutual needs, and they the elite started going, oh, we gotta stop that, and we gotta make sure that, here's one way we could do it. Let's make sure that the white people think they're a little bit better than the black people, and so that we can keep them in, so that they won't want to team up with each other, because that's very scary to them. I think somebody touched on that earlier, but I think it's important to know that has gone on throughout history, and that is still part of our culture, that we, that's what's being done to MAGA people, taught that they're better, without and explicitly preventing them from gaining knowledge, doing things to the Department of Education, and to torturing colleges, and just making it really difficult for learning to happen. And that is all part of that game of keeping white people and black people separate, by giving that wage of whiteness to the white people and creating that wall where we don't ever unite and work together for our mutual needs, which are very much the same. We need healthcare, we need all that stuff. So that's something I think people need to understand, particularly white people, that this is something that's being done to us. This is not the natural order of things. So,
Kelly, when I think about what you said, I think about the museums. I don't know any white person, and I've known many white people to go through especially the National Museum of African American History and Culture. There's not anybody that goes through there and who's not, number one, informed and educated, and two, that doesn't come out feeling better, not worse, but better and more informed about it. And it occurs to me that really is who would be, in some ways, almost most impacted by prohibiting and having those places shut down, prohibiting certain information to be shown. It's y'all. We're going to get that information from somewhere. We always have. Okay. I mean, it's our culture. It has to keep going. You, on the other hand, just like the repast issue, you wouldn't necessarily be exposed to it. So y'all need to be fighting for those things. I'm very heartened by the fact that the National Park Service, which they say doesn't get nearly as many Black folks as white folks, they put in suggestion boxes saying, if there is something you see here that we've put up that you think still is here with divisive concepts, put it in the suggestion box. And the vast majority of suggestions they have been getting have been, you need to put that stuff back. Why did you take it away in the first place? It was very informative. Yes, do that work. That is work you can do where you are as these things show up on your radar screen, because that whole Bacon's Rebellion is where that split started, because they saw that they could divide and conquer. And because of it, we still have vestiges of it today. So that's work that y'all need to do we've been surviving this whole thing. Y'all are just now finding out, and you need to do something about what you now know you did not want to be a part of. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we saw that coming together after George Floyd, when the whole BLM movement started. I was very happy, even during a pandemic. People came out, and they looked like everyone in the community. They looked like all the people. And that's what it should look like, all the people.
But you see how quickly they tried to shut all that stuff down, and there was a retrenchment, because what was it? Bacon's Rebellion 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
These folk are getting together. They see they have common interests. We need to do something about it. Isn't that interesting?
Right. It is.
And here we are 5 years
And we
later.
have to be ready for that.
The majority of that stuff has been erased, and they put in the policies specifically erasing it. There was already this retrenchment, but they put in the policies.
Mm-hmm.
Bacon's Rebellion 2.
Right. So the more...
But we got Kelly on the job.
That's what I'm saying. And the more people who are going to do the things that Kelly is doing, and Kelly's inspiring other people to do that. I'm glad that your family's inspired, because that continues to give you fuel. As we know, our families help us get there where we need to go. And it's good to know that there are allies. Every community needs allies, and we share the same interests. So why wouldn't we be allies?
It's been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you listening to me, but I just appreciate being here, and I'm so glad to know you two now.
Yes, absolutely. Same here. And we'd love to have you back anytime. Continue to watch your movement, watch your community grow. You've got a huge community. We're glad to be part of your community, as well as have you part of ours. And just want to keep in touch. Thank you so much for everything, Kelly.
You're so welcome. Thank